What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. So we get this report coming out from Shams Charania this morning. Basically, Jonathan Kaminga just saying that he's completely lost trust in Steve Kerr and his ability to help him reach his potential. And basically what happens is Kaminga ends up sitting the majority of the end of the game. When he was supposed to come back in late, Kerr's excuse was basically like Andrew Wiggins was playing well and Kaminga was sitting too long, so I didn't want to go back to him. But that doesn't really make sense considering with like 3 minutes left, he made a line shift of Chris Paul and Trayce Jackson-Davis and Dario Saric. So like I don't really necessarily agree with that reasoning. But here's the thing. Jonathan Kaminga handling that stuff in the press, not a good look. And it's not the first time he's done it this year. But he does have a point. Kerr was literally throwing stuff at the wall at the end of that game. And like Kaminga just has to be one of the things he throws at the wall there, especially against a team as big as Denver that's killing you and helping recover situations and on the offensive glass. Now, I personally would have gone with Steph and Klay with Wiggins and Kaminga and then Dario Saric. Maybe if Moody was in the rotation, but Moody's out of the rotation, maybe you can go with Moody in place of Wiggins there. But like, I would have gone with those guys. I think it would have just given you a much better chance of hanging defensively. You were already having all sorts of offensive limitations. Now, Steve Kerr is on the record, and he talked about this last night. He doesn't think the two of those guys fit well together. He said it doesn't look good on tape, and it doesn't look good in the numbers. And there are some numbers that back that up there. Here's my concern, though. Like, he's right. They are a little bit redundant, and they do need a perfect trio of players around them to be like really, really good. But that doesn't mean anything when the lineups he's throwing out there are also redundant and also lacking in key areas. It's not like he had a clearly defined lineup that made perfect sense that didn't include Kaminga. He was throwing shit at the wall, and Kaminga wasn't among the pile of shit he was throwing at the wall, if that makes sense. Right? And those are really aggressive words, but I'm trying to make a point. The bottom line is, in my opinion, if you're going to be bad, you need to be bad with Kaminga on the floor. Like, because in terms of upside, he has some of the highest upside on the team. He was playing great that game, having success attacking Jamal Murray in the post. Like, I don't understand how that wasn't one of the options that he went to down the stretch of the game. So even though I disagree with handling that sort of thing in the press, Jonathan Kaminga has a point. But like, it really, to me, shines a light on the bigger issue here. It's time. It's time for Golden State to pick a direction and go already. Is Steve Kerr a bad coach? No. I genuinely believe he's one of the best coaches in the league for a good veteran team that has an opportunity to win the title. He's very, very good with the tactical adjustments in playoff series, and he can manage the ebb and flow of that playoff path, right? But it's clear that philosophically, he hates playing young players that aren't excellent in the dirty work areas, right? Or at least in terms of their reputation. Like, I think it's interesting that he continually trusts Trayce Jackson-Davis and Brandon Podziemski, but not Moses Moody and Jonathan Kaminga. And it's because these guys have the higher end potential. I think Podziemski's a really good two-way player, but those two guys have like the really high end potential on offense. But like the thing too is like they can defend on the perimeter too. He's mainly concerned about their decision-making process. And Kerr gets so paranoid about guys making bad decisions that he gives these guys really short leashes. But like he doesn't have to worry about Trayce Jackson-Davis making a bad decisions because he's screening and rolling to the rim. But I would argue that he made it. Like, here's the thing though, like Trayce Jackson-Davis made a key defensive mistake at the end of the game, over helping on a Jokic roll that gave up a Aaron Gordon dunk. And even though that's not throwing a bad pass or taking a bad shot, it is still a decision-making mistake that led to 2 points for the other team. So I don't even necessarily buy that as a reason. But I'm just trying to say, like, I think Kerr's philosophy here is these guys are loose cannons. I can't trust them to do their job. So I'm going to go with the veterans and I'm going to go with the young players that he trusts to do their job. And so it's clear that as long as Kerr is at the helm of this thing, Kaminga's not going to get consistent opportunity. Moody's not going to get consistent opportunity unless there's some sort of directive from on high that he's willing to listen to. And maybe that'll happen here down the stretch. I mean, that's what they need to happen, at least until the deadline. But here's the reality. You need to do one of two things. You either need to fire Steve Kerr, rebuild, around the young players and move on to a new era, because Steve Kerr is not the right coach for a young rebuilding team. He's not good with young players, right? But he's the perfect coach for a soft rebuild around Steph, Klay, and Draymond. Not to mention Steph and Klay in particular would probably mutiny if you fired Steve Kerr if they were still on the roster, right? So do one or the other. Make up your mind. It's the middle ground which is getting you into trouble constantly over the last couple of years. So like, trade Jonathan Kaminga, trade Moses Moody, trade draft compensation, bring back a Siakam or a Markkanen or a Jeremy Grant, and run at it again with Steph and Klay and Draymond and those guys and Andrew Wiggins. Go, and Steve Kerr is the perfect guy for that group. You'll never have a Jonathan Kaminga report to the press again after that. But if you don't believe in that, then yeah, fire Steve Kerr and go this way. There's been so much talk about Steve Kerr being a bad coach. He's not a bad coach. He's coaching a bad team right now. That's what's happening. And they're a bad team in large part because one of their most important players has been suspended. There's one of their other most important players in Andrew Wiggins is just playing really bad basketball by his standards and what he's used to, right? And there's a philosophical schism taking place between the young players and their development and what's best for the team in the short term. And like, I would argue playing the young players is actually also better for the team in the short term until the trades are made, but Steve Kerr feels differently. And so in this in-between stretch, before they trade the young guys and up until the stretch where, or from now up until the stretch where they get something back at the trade deadline, that gap there, Steve Kerr is the bad coach for this group. Not because he is a bad coach, he's just not the right coach for this specific personnel dynamic. And that's what you're seeing manifesting there. But like at the end of the day, and maybe they do have to wait till the deadline because that's the best way to drive the price up, right? Because people just get a little bit more desperate when we get to February, right? But if that's the case, you either need a directive from on high, like I said, that said, hey, stop it with the Kaminga shit, get him out there on the floor, right? Or Warriors fans need to be prepared for a really ugly stretch here up until the deadline, which is not the end of the world because once again, once you get to the deadline, that we've seen, just like with the Lakers last year, you can make a run, get up to that 7 seed, and try to make some noise in the playoffs. And you know, if Golden State gets to that point and they have an OKC or they have a Minnesota in the first round, like Golden State's going to go into that series thinking they can win, especially if they bring back a high caliber player at the deadline, right? So like, not all is lost, but they need to make a decision. And before that decision, it's either going to look really bad, or there needs to be some sort of flexing of muscles in the front office or the ownership group to try to get Steve Kerr to start playing these young guys.